Victor Menasce is author of The Great Canadian Takeover. He's an actual real estate investor. Best of all, he's a Canadian just like us.
Yay!
And he's part of the group that, you've always heard me joke. Our plan is to have Canadians buy up all of the U.S. and sell it back. So his title is perfect. He believes that everyone, including you, can generate wealth from real estate, regardless of how much capital you have and regardless of where you live. In his book, The Great Canadian Takeover, he shows step-by-step the secrets that he used to amass a real estate portfolio spanning 3 time zones in the U.S. I'm dizzy just thinking about all those air miles. And all from his office in Ottawa, Canada. So I love that. So here to talk about his book, Real Estate Investment, and all things real estate is our good friend, Victor Menasce. Victor, good to have you in studio.
Glad to be back.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's start off by talking about, are there pitfalls in investing in stateside in compared to investing here in our own backyard in Canada?
Absolutely. As with any investment, there can always be pitfalls. The U.S. is a complex environment, and if you go into that environment not knowing the rules, you can end up buying things that you're not actually buying what you thought you were buying.
Yeah, because you told me a great little story just before we got on air in terms of Pennsylvania, right?
Oh,
and the ruling.
absolutely.
Maybe can you share that? Because I think that's pretty interesting.
Okay, so we'll set it up.
Sure.
So we don't have these so much in Canada, but in the U.S. they have what are called tax deeds. So if you don't pay your taxes, eventually the lien associated with the property will get sold, and then the property can actually be sold itself for the non-payment of taxes, and that's called a tax deed. Now, in most states, the person who buys that tax deed actually gets the property. State of Pennsylvania, there's actually a 9-month right of redemption with the original owner. However, if the original owner was not served properly, then that right of redemption can extend to 21 years.
So let's explain right of redemption, because we know what it means. But right of redemption essentially is, let's say you're the original property owner.
Correct.
And I'm assuming it's the same in the U.S., where let's say you're behind by $5,000 on a $50,000 property.
Yes.
What you're saying is the homeowner can come back 21 years later if the papers weren't served correctly and say, hey, I got $5,000, I'm taking my property back.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So not the best scenario if you're buying a property in Pennsylvania, especially, well, I guess only if you're buying a tax sale property.
A tax deed, yeah, exactly right. Now, what's happened, of course, is
but just in Pennsylvania.
It's only in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So the title companies that would normally insure title have stopped insuring title on tax deeds in the state of Pennsylvania.
So you can't get a mortgage on the property.
You can't get a mortgage.
You can't get insurance.
That's correct.
So this has to have impacted value.
Absolutely. So it's put this class of property into almost a legal or
Loophole.
market limbo.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
limbo land for sure. So is it safe to say that south of the border that obviously rules can differ from state?
Rules vary dramatically from state to state.
Yeah.
County to county?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some states, if you talk about foreclosures, people talk a lot about foreclosures in the U.S. Some states have judicial foreclosure laws.
Maybe you can explain the
which
difference.
means that it goes through the court system. So when you go to buy a property that's been foreclosed on, you actually go to an auction that is literally on the courthouse steps.
Right. And, and people have seen those shows. I mean, there's television shows that showcase that.
Absolutely.
All right?
Absolutely.
And so the other kind is
non-judicial. So non-judicial means that someone can privately foreclose, does not go through the court system. And those states are like the Wild West. I mean, anything goes. It's quite something.
Amazing.
Yeah, your cousin Billy Bob, you're going to give it to him for $5. Like we've heard about all kinds of crazy things. But it begs the questions. I mean, there are still auctions going on, judicial auctions.
Yes.
And obviously, they're not all great deals.
Correct.
But for example, if you're buying by judicial auction a tax property in Pennsylvania, that's a great example of not a great deal. But are there opportunities for Canadians? And here's the thing: you have to know where they are. You have to know what you're buying. You have to know the timing.
There's a lot more to it. I mean, in our business, we're very disciplined about how we buy things at auction. I'll give you an example. We bought 15 properties on one day. From the Philadelphia Housing Authority. They were auctioning off 400 properties on one day.
One day.
One day.
Oh.
They got a big ballroom. There were 1,000 people. They had to get a bigger ballroom because there were too many attendees. And they had packaged these 400 properties into different package sizes, anywhere from 1 property per package up to 25. And the smaller packages, people were bidding more than the market value. Auction fever took over, and people were paying just crazy prices. We got 15 properties for $360,000. I mean, we were shocked. One block over, the very next package, which was 2 properties, went for $215,000.
Victor, I am so hanging out with you.
And he's buying dinner.
That's unbelievable.
But you got to know what you're looking at. You got to know the ins and outs of this.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So that's a valid point.
And
so
you
for
have
our
to have the
listeners-
cash.
And you have to have the cash, sure.
Correct.
So for our listeners out there, can you guide in terms of if this is something that they want to get into, they have extra cash, what are some other things, key factors that you look at?
I'm always looking for special situations, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about real estate or any other business. I want a mismatch between supply and demand. So I want to go into an area where there's very high demand. In the case of Philadelphia, I don't really care about the Philadelphia market at large. I'm simply focused on a 10 by 20 block neighborhood next to Temple University. There's the university on one side, there's City Center, which is a very affluent neighborhood on the other side. There's a hospital, there's all these economic drivers that are making that neighborhood
attractive.
Okay. Right? My strategy is quite simple. I find that dividing line between a great neighborhood and a so-so neighborhood. And as long as that dividing line isn't a real boundary like a municipal boundary or a school district, if that line is arbitrary, I'll buy on the line and move the line. And I'll do it again. Buy on the line, move the line.
I love that, Simon. Buy on the line and move the line.
Move the line. I do that with Monopoly with my kids. Move the line.
There you go. How can you help our listeners to understand, or who can they go to truly understand? Because the last thing you want to do is be buying something because it looks like a deal of the century and then not have the knowledge base to back it up.
What I do for all of my investments is I focus first and foremost on getting the right team on the ground before I look even at a single property.
Okay.
I want to find a set of folks that
in each region,
in each local market, because a good deal badly managed is no deal.
Very good.
So it comes back to management. So what is the management? That's the team. The U.S. is an all-you-can-eat buffet of opportunity. It really is.
So who comprises your team?
So we work with other investors. We partner with other investors who are already demonstrated successful in those local markets. And we bring them value. We bring them additional capital. We bring them stronger systems. And so that marriage of the two skill sets really complement each other extremely well. Enables them to grow their business, enables us to grow our business.
And when we're talking multi-units, I guess we talk about, and Simon preaches how important the right management, the right people there to make sure that they're being run properly.
Absolutely.
With backup.
Yeah, with backup.
It's not just with backup. In fact, there's this term called property management. I think it's the wrong term because we don't manage properties. It's an inanimate object. What you're really managing is the relationship with the tenants.
Yeah.
And so the property managers that really understand that are the ones that are successful.
When we're sitting here as Canadians listening to all of this, I think a big part of the driving force has been a couple things. Well, first of all, prices have gone aggressively high and in some people's minds higher than they should be in the Toronto market. I disagree, but that's what a lot of Canadians are thinking. At the same time, they see prices in the U.S. as lower than what they should be.
Right.
And I agree with that one. But how much of the fact that the currency exchange rates, because now the dollar's at par, a few years ago it was almost 40% differential. How much of that you think is a driving force for Canadians investing in the U.S.?
I think that's certainly a big factor. I mean, last year there were $82 billion of foreign investment in U.S. real estate. And Canadians represented $19 billion of that. Number two behind that was China at $16 billion.
That says a lot right there.
Yeah, but it begs the question because we're seeing a lot of things going on south of the border now. Now
Yes.
with the all of the issues in Syria and how that's going to play out. Not to mention the U.S. is still dragging itself out of the mud. But there's a lot in the news lately about the Fed's pulling back on stimulus programs.
Correct.
And certainly that's going to affect the U.S. economy. But how much of that do you think could impact us? Because, people are always worried. If the U.S. sneezes, we catch cold. I don't believe that's necessarily true. But what's your thought on that?
So the U.S. started spending an awful lot of money to create liquidity in the market. Started in 2008, 2009. They had the TARP program and various other programs, and now the newer programs around quantitative easing. And the whole idea was to inject liquidity into the market. Now, what the banks did with that money is not what the government intended. The banks took that money and started buying treasury bills. So they were getting the money basically at zero interest. They're buying treasury bills at 1.25% interest and not putting it to work in the real estate market, which is what the government intended. So that's part of the reason why the government's pulling back on this, because they're saying, well, you're abusing what we could
do an entire show on what happened in the U.S. with the mortgage-backed
Yeah,
securities and everything else. So they're pulling back, but is that going to have an impact on us in our market?
Well, I don't think
believe
so.
it is.
I don't think it will because, frankly, the banks have a lot of cash. And the problem, yes, in 2008 was a liquidity problem. We do not have a liquidity problem today. The banks are sitting on tons of cash. They need to place it now.
They need to help fuel the economy,
Absolutely.
right? Fuel the real estate industry.
And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's getting much easier to get financing in the U.S. than it was 6 months ago. Way easier.
So we're going to have you come back because we need to talk more.
There's a lot more to cover. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think what we should do is let you, again, remind our listeners about your book. So again, it's The Great Canadian Takeover, which is a fantastic read. And would you say that this is a great starting point in terms of helping them get educated? When
Absolutely.
You think about going
Absolutely.
sell-side?
It really demystifies some of the differences between the Canada and U.S. market. And frankly, I wrote the book because I saw a void in the marketplace, because most of the books I'd seen on the topic predate 2007, and it's a completely different world.
Absolutely. And there's so much of the seminars out there, preaching REO and talking about foreclosures, and it's just the wrong angle. I think it's baiting people with greed. I've had a look at your book, and it's good, solid information, but we definitely have to have Victor back. Absolutely. Victor Menasce, author of The Great Canadian Takeover. We're going to have you back. Thanks so much for being here.
Great job.